You're looking at your phone when the message comes in. One line. Maybe an email subject, a missed call, a short sentence that changes the tone of the entire day. Your stomach drops, your chest tightens, and before you've even finished reading it, your mind is already racing ahead to worst-case outcomes. You don't like admitting how one piece of bad news can hijack your entire day, even when nothing else has actually happened yet. Here's the interruption you can use today. Exactly as written, nothing else happens for the next 60 seconds. Say it once, quietly, and then put the phone face down. In the next 10 minutes, the surge slows. Your breathing steadies. You're no longer stacking imaginary problems on top of the original one, and your body stops acting like everything is on fire at once. Educational content inspired by classical Stoic texts. Not medical, psychological, financial, or legal advice. This won't rush you, but it will keep you from spiraling. The pain here is specific and familiar. One piece of bad news lands, about money, work, health, or a relationship, and suddenly it colors everything. You can't focus. You replay the message. You start making mental decisions you haven't thought through yet. Even when nothing else goes wrong, the day feels ruined because your nervous system never stood down. This is costing you judgment, energy, and often money or credibility, because panic pushes you into moves you wouldn't make if you were steady. What makes this worse is speed. The news hits, your body reacts instantly, and your mind follows it. You tell yourself you're just being realistic, but what you're actually doing is letting the first emotional spike decide the tone of the entire day. Once that happens, it's hard to get back to neutral. By the end of this lesson, you won't prevent bad news from happening. What you will learn is how to stabilize yourself in under a minute, how to interrupt the panic response before it turns into action, and how to make decisions later, from a calmer place, instead of from the initial shock. The goal isn't emotional numbness. It's early control, so the moment doesn't own you. If learning how to stay steady when something unexpected hits matters to you, these lessons are built to give you tools you can actually use under pressure. Subscribe for more lessons like this. First, you'll learn how to slow your body down fast so your thinking has a chance to catch up. Next, you'll see how to stop your mind from immediately jumping to conclusions and decisions. Then, you'll practice holding steady when the news tries to pull you into urgency and reaction. Finally, you'll watch how this reset works inside a real situation where the stakes feel high and the impulse to act is strong. There's a moment later where the bad news is real, ongoing, and unresolved, and the temptation is to make a quick decision just to feel relief. When that moment shows up, you'll know how to pause without freezing and move forward without panic. You're sitting at your desk when the email comes in. Subject line only. You don't even open it yet, but your body reacts immediately. Heart rate up. Jaw tight. A flush of heat in your chest. Before you've read a single word, your nervous system has already decided something is wrong. Here's the microscript to use in that exact moment, verbatim. I don't decide anything for 60 seconds. Say it once, and then physically lean back in your chair or put your feet flat on the floor. This works because bad news doesn't just arrive as information, it arrives as a body event. Your nervous system hears threat before your mind hears meaning. When that happens, your ability to think clearly drops fast. This script interrupts the reflex to act while your system is still flooded. You're not avoiding the problem. You're delaying your reaction long enough to regain control. Picture this in a common North American work scenario. A client email hints at dissatisfaction. A manager asks for a quick meeting. The number in your bank app is lower than expected. You might open the message immediately, fire off a response, start rearranging your day, or mentally spiral into consequences that haven't happened yet. With this rule, you don't engage right away. You buy yourself 1 minute of stability before doing anything else. Here's the tiny action you can take today. When bad news hits, don't touch the keyboard or phone for 60 seconds. Set a timer if you need to. Your only job during that minute is to stay physically still enough for the initial surge to pass. This is measurable. Either you paused or you didn't. Now slow this down for a brief practice. Inhale through your nose for 4 seconds. Exhale through your mouth for 6. Do that twice. You're not trying to calm down completely. You're trying to signal to your body that it doesn't need to escalate further. A common mistake here is telling yourself you'll just read it real quick. Reading often turns into reacting. Reacting turns into damage control. The cost isn't the bad news, it's what you do in the first minute after it arrives. That's where impulsive emails get sent, hasty decisions get made, and the rest of the day gets hijacked. Another version of this shows up with personal news. A text that feels off. A short reply that triggers insecurity. A voicemail that sounds serious. You feel compelled to respond immediately, as if speed equals responsibility. The correction is the same. 60 seconds of stillness before engagement. Why this works is simple. Emotional spikes peak quickly if you don't feed them. Most of the intensity you feel in the first moments isn't the situation, it's adrenaline. When you don't act on it, your system naturally downshifts. Once it does, your thinking becomes available again. Here's a brief slow practice moment you can use right now. Imagine receiving bad news. Feel the initial jolt. Then imagine doing nothing for 1 minute, no scrolling, no typing, no rehearsing responses. Notice how uncomfortable that pause feels, and notice that the discomfort doesn't grow forever. It crests and eases. This matters later because once the minute passes, you're still going to have to deal with the news. The difference is how. From a steadier place, you're less likely to catastrophize, overcommit, or make panic-driven choices. You don't avoid reality, you meet it with more control. There's another layer coming where the news isn't just shocking, it's genuinely consequential, and your mind starts racing with what-if scenarios. That's where this pause becomes the foundation for something stronger, and where the reset turns into clear thinking instead of emotional damage control. You open the message this time. It's not good, but it's not catastrophic either. A project is delayed. A client is unhappy. An unexpected expense shows up. The information lands, and immediately your mind starts filling in gaps, what this might mean, what could happen next, what you should do right now to stop it from getting worse. This is where the second wave hits. The mistake most people make after bad news isn't panic anymore, it's premature problem solving. Your body has barely settled, but your mind rushes ahead, trying to regain control by planning, fixing, deciding. It feels productive. It feels responsible. And it quietly locks you back into stress. The correction is to separate understanding from action. Here's the rule to use, exactly as written, I'm only allowed to understand, not solve, for the next 5 minutes. Say it once after the initial pause, and then reread the information slowly. This works because the urge to act is often just another form of anxiety. When something feels uncertain, your brain wants closure. It tries to manufacture relief by jumping to decisions before the situation is fully clear. By limiting yourself to understanding, you stop feeding that urgency without suppressing reality. Picture this in a familiar North American work scenario. You receive an email that suggests a budget cut might affect your team. You might immediately start thinking about layoffs, updating your resume, or sending defensive messages. With this correction, you reread the email and ask only factual questions. What is actually stated? What is not stated? What is confirmed, and what is implied? You haven't decided anything yet. You just clarify. Here's a tiny action you can take today. When bad news arrives, write down 3 facts and 0 interpretations. Facts are what's explicitly said. Interpretations are what you're adding. This is measurable. If you find yourself writing this probably means you've crossed the line. Now pause for a brief slow practice. Take 1 breath and imagine holding a piece of information without moving it forward. No fixing. No rehearsing conversations. Just holding. Notice how uncomfortable that feels, and how that discomfort is different from panic. It's quieter. Less sharp. More manageable. A common belief gets in the way here: if I don't act quickly, I'll fall behind. But acting on partial information doesn't give you an advantage, it increases the chance of missteps. Calm understanding often saves more time than rushed action. Another version of this shows up with personal news. A text that feels distant. A change in someone's tone. You immediately start constructing explanations and responses in your head. The correction is the same. Understand first. Solve later. Often, the story you were about to act on dissolves once you see the facts clearly. Why this works is grounded in control. You can't control outcomes in the first minutes after bad news. You can control whether you escalate your own stress. Understanding without solving keeps you engaged without being hijacked. Here's a quick pattern interrupt if you catch your mind racing ahead. Ask, what do I actually know for sure right now? Say it out loud if you need to. Then stop there. Don't answer the next question yet. This matters later because some bad news doesn't resolve quickly. You may need to sit with uncertainty for hours or days. If you train yourself to immediately solve every discomfort, you'll exhaust yourself chasing certainty that isn't available. This rule gives you a way to stay present without spiraling. Notice the momentum now. First, you stopped your immediate reaction. Then, you limited premature action. You're not avoiding the problem, you're approaching it in layers. Each layer restores a bit more control. As we move forward, the pressure increases again. There will be moments where understanding is clear, but the emotional charge comes back anyway, when someone pushes for a response, or when the implications start to feel real. That's where the reset gets stress-tested, and where steadiness has to hold even when waiting feels hard. There's a belief that quietly drives your stress when bad news doesn't resolve quickly. If I don't respond fast, I'll lose control of the situation. It sounds practical, responsible. But under pressure, this belief pushes you into decisions made for speed instead of clarity, and those decisions often create more problems than the original news. Here's the myth to let go of. Speed is not the same as control. In many situations, speed actually reduces your leverage. Calm timing increases it. When the pressure rises, when someone follows up, when a deadline feels closer, when your mind keeps replaying the implications, you don't rush into action to discharge the anxiety. You stabilize again. The instruction is simple and deliberate. Here's the script, exactly as written. I'll respond after I've had time to think clearly. Say it once, either out loud to yourself or directly to the other person, and then honor it. This matters because bad news often creates external urgency on top of internal stress. Someone wants an answer, a response, a plan. If you let their urgency override your clarity, you trade short-term relief for long-term regret. This line buys you time without avoidance and without confrontation. Picture this in a familiar North American work context. You get bad news about a project delay. You pause. You understand the facts. Then your manager asks, "What do you want to do?" You might feel cornered and offer a solution immediately just to stop the tension. With this correction, you say the line calmly. You don't sound uncertain, you sound deliberate. You signal that you're thinking, not panicking. This works because it reframes the moment. Instead of appearing stuck or reactive, you appear intentional. Most reasonable people respect that. And even if they don't, you've still protected your decision-making window. Now slow this moment down for a brief practice. Imagine someone waiting for your answer while you feel pressure in your chest. Take one breath and picture yourself not filling the silence. Let the pause exist. Notice that the discomfort peaks and then softens. Pauses feel dangerous only when you're not used to them. A common mistake here is over-explaining the delay. You start justifying why you need time, listing reasons, apologizing for not having an answer yet. That turns a boundary into a negotiation. I'll respond after I've had time to think clearly is complete. Anything added weakens it. This same dynamic shows up outside of work. You receive bad personal news, and friends or family ask what you're going to do next. You don't actually know yet, but you feel pressure to say something decisive. The correction is the same. You're allowed to be in the space between information and action. Here's a slow practice you can do today. The next time someone asks you a question that spikes your stress, notice whether you're answering to reduce their discomfort or to reflect your clarity. If it's the former, pause. Give yourself permission to wait. The stakes here are higher than comfort. Panic decisions often lock you into paths that are hard to reverse: financial commitments, emotional promises, and strategic moves you didn't fully think through. Waiting, even briefly, keeps your options open. Another false belief gets exposed here: strong people decide quickly. In reality, strong people decide at the right time. They can tolerate uncertainty without trying to escape it. That tolerance is a form of control most people never practice. There's a vignette coming where this gets tested fully. The bad news is real. The pressure is layered. Someone is waiting on you. The urge to act is strong because action feels like relief. You'll see what it looks like to hold steady anyway, not frozen, not passive, but grounded, long enough for a better move to become visible. That's where this reset proves itself. Not when things calm down on their own, but when they don't, and you stay steady anyway. You're halfway through your afternoon when the call comes in. You already know what it's about. You step outside, lean against the building, and listen as the situation gets explained: budget changes, shifting priorities, uncertainty that doesn't resolve cleanly. Nothing explodes. Nothing gets fixed. But the weight of it settles on you anyway. As soon as the call ends, the old reaction almost takes over. Your heart is still beating fast. Your mind starts sprinting ahead: what this means for next month, what you say to someone else, what move would make this feeling go away. You feel the pull to open your email, fire off a message, do something so you don't have to sit with discomfort. You catch it. You use the first tool without ceremony. I don't decide anything for 60 seconds. You put the phone in your pocket and stand still. The city noise keeps moving around you. Cars pass. People talk. Nothing else happens. Your breathing slows just enough that the moment doesn't tip into panic. When the minute passes, you don't rush forward. You use the second tool. You replay the call in your head, but only to understand, not to solve. What was actually said? What wasn't? What's confirmed and what's still open? You notice how different this feels from spinning. It's quieter. Heavier, but steadier. You head back inside and sit at your desk. An email draft starts to form in your mind, urgent and defensive. This is where, in the past, you would have sent something you later wished you'd rewritten. Your fingers hover over the keyboard. You stop again. I'm only allowed to understand, not solve, for the next 5 minutes. You write down a few facts on a scrap of paper. No conclusions. No next steps. Just information. The act of writing drowns you. The situation doesn't feel good, but it feels contained. Then the pressure returns from the outside. A message comes in: any thoughts on next steps? It's polite. It's reasonable. And it lands right on the edge of your calm. The urge to respond immediately surges again, because answering feels like relief. This is where the old pattern almost wins. Instead, you use the third tool. I'll respond after I've had time to think clearly. You type it, reread it once, and send it. No explanation. No apology. The moment after you hit send is uncomfortable. Your chest tightens slightly. You wonder how it will be received. You resist the urge to check for a reply. You wait. Over the next hour, something subtle happens. The situation doesn't resolve, but your relationship to it changes. You're no longer reacting to every internal spike. You're holding the situation instead of letting it hold you. Later, you sketch a few possible options, not to commit to them, but to see them on paper. Some feel premature. One feels reasonable. You haven't decided yet. At the end of the day, the problem is still there. Nothing magical happened. But you notice something important as you pack up to leave: you're not emotionally wrecked. You didn't torch your energy trying to outrun uncertainty. You didn't make a move just to feel in control. As you drive home, your thoughts are clearer. Not optimistic. Not pessimistic. Just clearer. You can see tomorrow without dread. You know what questions need answering next, and which ones don't yet. That's the improvement. The bad news didn't disappear. The stakes didn't drop. But you didn't let the first emotional surge dictate the rest of the day. You created space between information and action, and in that space, you stayed intact. This is what the reset looks like in real life. Not dramatic calm. Not perfect decisions. Just steadiness returning sooner than it used to. And tomorrow, when the situation continues unfolding, you'll meet it from that steadier place, not because everything is resolved, but because you are no longer hijacked. What you've been practicing in this lesson is the difference between reacting to bad news and responding to it. Reacting happens fast. It's automatic. One piece of information hits your system, and suddenly your whole day is shaped by urgency, fear, or the need to regain control. Responding is slower, but stronger. It creates space between what happens and what you do next. That space is where steadiness lives. First, you learned how to interrupt the initial emotional surge by refusing to decide anything in the first 60 seconds. That single pause stopped your nervous system from hijacking your judgment before you even knew what was happening. Then, you practiced separating understanding from solving, so your mind could take in the facts without racing ahead to conclusions. Next, you learned how to handle external pressure, requests for answers, follow-ups, expectations, without rushing into decisions just to relieve discomfort. Finally, you saw how these tools work together in a real situation where the bad news didn't resolve, but your reaction did. The core lesson is simple: bad news doesn't ruin your day. Unchecked reaction does. When you slow the body first, then slow the mind, you regain choice. You stop letting the first emotional spike decide everything that follows. Now let's lock this into action with 3 things you can do today. First, commit to the 60-second rule once. The next time bad news arrives, an email, a text, a number you don't like, say, "I don't decide anything for 60 seconds, and physically stop moving. No typing. No pacing. No planning. Just stillness until the surge passes. Second, practice understanding without solving. Write down 3 facts from the situation and 0 interpretations. If you catch yourself writing what something probably means, stop. Facts first. Decisions later. Third, use time as a boundary when pressure shows up. If someone asks you for an answer before you're steady, say, "I'll respond after I've had time to think clearly," and mean it. Notice how much calmer your decisions feel when they aren't made to escape anxiety. As you continue building this skill, the next layer is learning how to return to focus after emotional disruption, how to re-enter your work or your day once the reset has happened. A natural follow-up lesson would be something like emotional control, how to refocus after you've been thrown off, because it takes this steadiness and applies it to sustained action. That's where emotional control becomes practical momentum. You don't need to eliminate emotional reactions. You don't need to become numb or detached. What you're building is recovery speed, the ability to return to center faster after something hits. When you can do that, bad news stays contained. It becomes one part of the day, not the author of it. If you want continued emotional control that holds up under real pressure, not motivation, not noise, subscribe and keep building this skill.